Today's tutorial is for those of you who are beginners and want to learn how to work with shapes to build other shapes and objects. As you can see here, I'm going to show you how to create these 5 different science-themed icons using nothing but basic shapes and the pen tool in Inkscape. And to show you what these are, I can just select them and change their colors, and you can see these are all just plain vectors. And if I grab the nodes tool, you can see their individual nodes. And there you go. So I'll be showing you how to make each of these one by one. You can look at the chapters down in the timeline below if you want to skip to a certain point in the lesson. Before we get started though, if you want to learn more about how Inkscape works, be sure to check out my Inkscape Masterclass. It's a collection of over 80 videos where we go over all of the tools and features in Inkscape, and I explain what they are and demonstrate how they work, kind of like how I will do in this video. We even have a private community where you can ask questions and get help from me anytime you need it. I'll have some information about that down below if you want to check that out. And now that that's out of the way, let's get started. So to get us started, I will demonstrate how to create this double helix icon. So let me move this out of the way, and I'll press 1 on the keyboard to zoom out to 100%. And the first step is I'm going to grab my circles and ellipses tool, hold Control and click and drag to draw a perfectly round circle. And now we're going to remove the fill color by clicking this red X down here, and we're going to apply a black stroke by holding Shift and clicking the black swatch down there in the bottom left corner. And then we will go to Path and select Object to Path, and then grab the Nodes tool, and I'm going to select these top 3 nodes right here. And with those 3 nodes selected, I'll come up here to the top left and click on this icon that says Insert New Nodes into Selected Segments. And now I want to select just those 2 nodes that we just added and break the path at those 2 nodes. So I'll come up here to this icon that says Break Path at Selected Nodes and click on that. And now we can break the object apart by going to Path and selecting Break Apart. And now let me grab my selection tool. Let me press the Escape key to deselect everything. And I'll just take this part of the object and press Delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. Now I'm going to select this object, and I want to open up the Fill and Stroke menu. So I'll come down here to this stroke stripe in the bottom left corner and double click that, and it'll open up the Fill and Stroke menu. And then we can come over here to the Stroke Style tab, and we can change the width of this. I have mine set to 40 pixels. You may have to use a different value based on your screen resolution and how large or small you created your circle. I'm just going to eyeball it though. We want something about that thick. We don't want anything too thin like that. That's not going to really work for what we're doing. And likewise, we don't want anything too large either. So I found that 40 is a nice happy medium there. I'm going to set the cap to rounded for now so that the ends are rounded. And let me bring the opacity of this down in half. And then I'm going to duplicate this by pressing Control D on the keyboard. And I'll move this over and flip this vertically, clicking the Object Flip Vertical button. And let me turn on snapping by clicking this magnet icon in the top right corner. And I'm going to snap these 2 ends together like that. And now I'm going to duplicate that and repeat the process. So I'll press Control D, that would be Command D if you're on Mac, and then snap this to this end right here as well. Now I'm going to select all 3 of these, go back to the Nodes tool, and I'm going to select these 2 nodes right here and connect them together by clicking this button that says Join Selected Nodes. And we'll do the same thing over here. Select these 2, go to Join Selected Nodes, and now that is all one object. And once it's all one object, I'm going to take this node on the end right here and press Delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. And I'll do the same thing to this node over here. Press Delete to get rid of it. And now we want to make these caps squared again. So I'll come back over here to the menu and I will choose the squared option. And there we go. So let me grab my selection tool now. For what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come up here and ensure that this option is not enabled, where it says when scaling objects, scale the stroke width by the same proportion. Make sure that's disabled. If you have that enabled, go ahead and disable that. And then we will disable snapping as well. I'm just going to hold my Shift key and grab this top arrow and just scale this up to distort it a little bit. And then I'm going to duplicate this by pressing Command D, and then I will flip it vertically. And that right there is about what we're going for. And at this point, you can determine how thick you want your strokes to be. So I noticed with mine, I made them a little too heavy. So I'll select them both and I'll come back over here and bring them down a little bit. That looks pretty good. And once you're happy with how it looks, you can go to Path and select Stroke to Path. And now that will be finalized. So now I'm going to draw some rectangles going in the middle here. So let me grab my rectangle tool. I'll click and drag to draw a rectangle. And I'm going to fill this with black, and I'm going to get rid of that black stroke by holding Shift and clicking the X down here. and I'll place that. Let me grab my selection tool. I'll place that right about there. I'll adjust the width as needed. And I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to press Control D, and then I'll hold Control, move this one over here. Press Control D again, hold Control, move this one over here. And now we want to make sure that these are evenly spaced apart. So let me select all three of these, and I will open up the alignment menu by going to Object and selecting Align to Distribute. And I'm going to choose Last Selected from the Relative To dropdown, and then come down here to where it says Distribute, and choose this option that says Distribute Horizontally with Even Horizontal Gaps, and that'll ensure that there's equal spacing between them. And then I will group them together by going to Object, Group, and then hold Shift and click on one of those shapes right there, and just make sure it's centered by clicking the Center on Vertical Axis. And now we can ungroup it by going to Object and selecting Ungroup. So now we're going to click off of that to deselect it, and we're going to take this, make another copy, hit Control D, and then hold Control and move this one over here. And then do the same thing, Control D, hold Control, move this one over here. And then we're going to group the two end rectangles together. So I'll hold Shift and select the other one. Make sure you have them both selected. Or you know what, let me move this in a little closer so it looks a little more even to this open space over here. And I'll do the same thing with this one. I'll move that one a little closer. And then I'll hold Shift and click on the other rectangle. And with them both selected, go to Object, Group, and then hold Shift and click on the larger shape out there, and then center it vertically, just to ensure that everything's all centered up and lined up nicely. And now we can go to Object, Ungroup. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'm going to select each of these rectangles. I'm going to hold my Shift key and select all of these. We want to make sure we have them all selected, and we'll unify them together by going to Path and selecting Union. And now I'm going to take this bottom shape down here. I'll press Command D to duplicate that, and then I will click on the red swatch to turn that red. And I want to create an offset of this. You can create an offset by going to Path and selecting Outset. I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut by pressing Control and the number 0. So I'm going to press Control 0 or Command 0 if you're on Mac. If you press it once, it offsets it one step. I'm going to press it again, and then a third time, and then a fourth time. We want a nice sized offset there. And then I'll grab my pen tool. I'm going to choose this option over here in the settings, the straight line segment. And I'm going to come up here between these two rectangles on the right half of the design, and I'll click to add a point, hold Control, bring this down, click again to add another point, and then bring this shape going around the outside of the red shape and back to the starting point. And I'll grab my selection tool, hold Shift, click on the red shape, and go to Path, Intersection. And now I will right-click this and go to Duplicate, hold Shift, click on the larger outer shape up here, and go to Path, Difference, and you can see what happened in there. It created a negative space in there. And now I'm going to select just this red shape right here, hold Shift, click on the rectangles in the middle, and go to Path, Difference. And you can see what we did there. We created a little bit of empty space, a little bit of some padding between those shapes over here. And now we're going to do the same thing over here with the top object on the right-hand side. So let me select the top object. I'm going to press Control D to duplicate that, make this red, and again, we're going to apply that outset. If you don't want to use the keyboard shortcut, again, just Path and select Outset. I'm just going to use my keyboard shortcut, Control and the number 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. The same number of steps that I used before. And I'm going to grab the pen tool again. And this time I'm going to grab, instead of doing the right-hand side, I'm going to do the left-hand side. So I'm going to come over here, click on that, and then bring this around back to the starting point and select both of these, Path, Difference. And then I will duplicate this by pressing Control D, hold Shift, click on the shape right there, go to Path, Difference, and then take this red shape, hold Shift, click on the rectangles, and go to Path, Difference. And what you could do now is you can select all of these and unify them together by going to Path Union. And you can bring the opacity all the way up to 100. Let me come back over here to my Fill and Stroke menu, bring the opacity to 100. Click on the object to get the rotation handles, and then hold Control and rotate it around like this a few steps So you end up with a double helix like that. And that's how you can go about creating a double helix using nothing but simple shapes. Now let's go over how to create this dropper icon. So let me move this out of the way, zoom back out to 100%. I'm going to grab my circles and ellipses tool and I'll click and drag to draw an ellipse like that. I'll go to my selection tool. Let me make this black and I'll bring the opacity down to 50% using this input down here. And then I'm going to right click this and go to duplicate and hold control and move this up about that far. And then I will turn my snapping back on and grab the rectangle tool. And I want to snap to this. Let me try that again. I'm going to snap to this left edge of the top circle, click and drag, and then snap to this right edge of the bottom circle. And now we can grab our selection tool, select all of those, and go to Path, Union. And what I'm creating here is the top part of the dropper. So let me turn off snapping for now. And let me grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to click and drag to draw a rectangle going up here. And I'll take this handle and bring this down so that we have rounded corners like that. And I'll place this in here. Let me center that up. I'm going to select both of those, go to the alignment menu and make sure they're centered. And I'm just going to elongate this a little more. I want this to be a little longer. And after doing that, I'll have to go back to my rectangle tool to adjust this to make sure it's not too distorted. And now I can zoom out, select both of those, and go to Path, Union. And now we have the top part of the dropper created. So I'm going to hold Control and Shift and scale that down a little bit. And now we're going to create the bottom part. So let me grab the rectangle tool again. I'm going to create a rectangle going down here like that. Let me move this up in there. Make sure I have both of those centered. And then I'm going to select this object, Control D, hold Control, move this one down here, and then hold Control and grab this bottom arrow and scale that down and bring this down about this far. I'm going to keep scaling it down until we end up with something like that right there. And now I'm going to hold Shift and click on the other rectangle and go to Path, Union. And then I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to grab my Nodes tool and I'm going to click on this button up here in the toolbar that says Add Corners LPE. And once you do that, you can select these two corners right here and then take the handle and just round that off like that so we have a nice rounded corner. So it looks kind of like a dropper, or the end of a dropper anyway. And we can finalize that by going to Path and selecting Object to Path. And now I'm going to create an outline going around this. So what I will do is I'm going to right click this and go to duplicate. And then I'm going to make this red. And then I'll hold Shift and click red so that we have a red stroke around it. And I'm going to come over here to the Fill and Stroke menu. I'll click on the Stroke Style tab and I'll make that larger. I'm going to hold up on this plus icon and make it about that much larger. That looks pretty good. And then we will go to Path, Stroke to Path, Object, Ungroup, and then Path, Union. And then we could send that to the bottom by clicking this button, Lower Selection to the bottom. And I'm going to hold Shift and click on the other rectangle, and I'm going to scale these down to make sure that they're not wider than the top of the dropper up here. If I bring this up, you can see it's a lot wider. We don't want that. So I'm going to scale that down, holding Control the whole time so that we don't lose our position and that we scale everything proportionately. And maybe I'll make it a little larger. There we go. And now I'm going to select both of these, or all three of these. Click on it to get the rotation handle and hold Control and grab this corner handle and rotate it clockwise. 1, 2, 3. 3 steps to the right. And now I'm going to, let me take this object, hold Shift, click on this object behind it, and go to Path and select Difference. And now I'm going to add some liquid in here at the bottom. So let me grab my pen tool, click on the inside of this red line right here, hold Control, bring the line straight across, click to add another point, and then I will let go of Control and just finish drawing this shape going around the inside of this red outline. There we go. Let me grab my selection tool, and now we can select everything, all of those objects, and go to Path and select Union. Bring the opacity all the way up and make that black. And if you notice, I also added a little drop of liquid coming out of the bottom of it. So if you want to do that, I'll show you how to do that real quick. Let me scale this down a little bit. To create the water drop, I'm going to grab the circle tool, hold Control, click and drag to draw a circle. I'm going to get rid of that outline by holding Shift and clicking the X down there. And now I'll convert this to a path by going to Path, Object to Path. And I'm going to take this node over here on the top and hold Control and move this up. I'm going to take these nodes right here, and I'm going to make them auto smooth by clicking this button that says Make Selected Nodes Auto Smooth. And then I'll hold Control and move them down about that far. And now I can grab my selection tool and scale this down further. And if you want, you can grab the node tool and just pull this down a little more. Okay, that looks good as it is. And then you can adjust the size. You can make it bigger or smaller according to the size of the dropper. And then we could just group them together by going to Object, Group, and there we go. That's how you can create that simple dropper icon. Now we will create this light bulb icon. So let's get started on that. I'm going to grab my circle tool, hold Control and click and drag to create a circle. And then I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and click and drag to draw a rectangle about that size. And I'm going to grab the, I'm going to click this button up here that says Make Corners Sharp. We want sharp corners there. And I'm going to place this in the center of the circle like this. And I'm going to select both of these and make sure I have them centered using the Align and Distribute menu. And let me press Escape to deselect them. And I'm going to select just the rectangle right here and go to Path and select Object to Path. And now I will grab the Nodes tool, select these two nodes, and I'm going to turn on this option up here that says Show Transformation Handles for selected nodes. And I'm going to hold Control and Shift and grab the scaling handles and just scale this in about that far. And then we can turn that setting off. And let me grab my selection tool again. And I'm just going to adjust this. You can adjust the size by holding Control and clicking and dragging up and down like that. Try to envision a light bulb. So use that as like a guide for how large or small to make this rectangle. I'm going to make it about that size. And I'm going to select both of these objects and go to Path, Union. And then I will go to my Nodes tool. Let's enable the Add Corners LPE setting and select these two nodes right here and just round them off like that. And then I'll select these two nodes down here and I'll round these corners about that much. And once you're finished with that, you can convert it to a path by coming up here to this button that says Object to Path. And there we go. Now we have that finalized. All right, so now that that's done, let's create the filament going inside of the light bulb. To do that, I'm going to grab my Squares and Rectangles tool, hold Control, click and drag to draw a square. Let me set the opacity of this down to 50 so that I can see what I'm doing better. I'm going to set this to 50 and press Enter. And I'm going to create, the reason I do that is because I'm going to create a circle on top of that. So let me grab my Select tool now. Let me give this a determined width and height first. I'm going to come up here to the toolbar with the Selection tool enabled. I want to make sure I have this lock icon enabled that says when locked, change width and height by the same proportion. And I'm just going to use a nice round number. It's set to 260 and some decimal points after that. I'm just going to set it to 250. And then I'll grab my Circle tool. I'll hold Control and Shift and draw a circle, a nice round circle like that. And I want to make this the same width, so I'll set this to 260 as well. And I'll select both of these objects and I'm going to center them vertically and horizontally so that they're on top of each other. Well, something went wrong there. I made this 250. All right, this one's supposed to be 250. Okay, I used the wrong value there. Let me center them up. And with them both selected, it should look like this with them both the same size. And I will go to my Shape Builder tool and I'll just draw a line going through here like that. We want a shape like that. And there we go. So I'm going to bring the opacity of this back up to 100. And I'm going to place this over the light bulb. And I'm going to hold Shift and press the white swatch to apply a white stroke. And then I will turn off the fill color by clicking the red X over here. And I'm going to make this a much smaller value. So let me come back over here to my fill and stroke menu. I'm going to set this to something like 8. And then I'll hold Control and just scale this down and put this right about here. And then I'll duplicate that by pressing Control D. I'll flip this vertically or horizontally, and then hold Control and move this one over here. And let me select them both and just move them where they need to be. Okay. And I'm going to select both of these. I'm going to group them together by going to Object, Group, and then I'll center it on top of the light bulb. So let me come back over here to my Align and Distribute menu and center it like that. Okay. And now, let me scale it down a little more, bring it down. And now I'm going to create lines going in here. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, and let's turn on snapping. I'm going to snap to this corner and click, and then snap to that corner and click, and press Enter. And we now have a black line. We want to make that white to match these two shapes right here. So I'm going to hold Shift and click on the white swatch. And I want to make this the same size that I made these lines. So let me select this now. Let me go to Object, Ungroup. And if I click on just one of them, you can come over here and see. I think I used 8. Okay, so I want to make this the same size. I'll make this 8 pixels. And then I'm going to click off of that, go back to the pen tool, and do the same thing. Snap to this corner, but bring the line down here. Hold Control, bring the line straight down like that. Press Enter. Hold Shift, click on the white swatch, and we'll make this 8 pixels as well. And now instead of drawing another line, we can just press Control D to duplicate that and then snap that over here like that. And if you want, you can select all of these now and you can increase or decrease the line size based on the rest of the image. So that's a good weight right there. I'm going to leave it as it is. With all of those selected, I will go to Path, Stroke to Path, and then Path Union. And then I'll select everything here and go to Path Difference. And now what I will do is, if you notice, these are hard corners in here. So I'm going to grab the Nodes tool and I'm going to use the Add Corners LPE option again, enable that. And then I'll just select these 3 nodes right here and I'm just going to round these off so that they're not sharp corners, they're rounded instead. And that just adds a nicer touch, I think, anyway. And now we can go to Path, Object to Path. Okay, so we have the top part of the light bulb finished. Now I'm going to create these glowing lines going around it. So to do that, let me turn off snapping first. Let me select this object and bring the opacity back down to 50% because I'm going to be drawing shapes on top of this. And I'm going to grab the pen tool, click to add a point, hold Control, click to add another point, press Enter. And let me go to my selection tool and I'll make that line larger. And I'll just use a nice round number. I'll use 20. Oops, something went wrong there. Okay, I'll make that a rounded cap. And let me grab my Nodes tool and make that a little smaller, actually. I'm going to hold Control and bring that down. And now I will duplicate this by pressing Control D. And I'll hold Control and bring this one down here. And then I'll hold Control. Or you know what, we don't want to bring it down that far. We want to bring it down about here. And then I'll hold Shift and click on this object. And I will go to Object, Group. And then I want to center these 2 objects right here. So let me grab the selection tool and center them. And now I want to take this shape, or this grouping of shapes, click on it to get the rotation handles, and then hold Control. And if you notice, if you hold Control, you can move it around like that. And while you're doing this, you could press the space bar to make copies. So I'll press the space bar to make a copy there, and then I'll bring this one step over to the right, make another copy. And I'm just going to bring this around and keep making copies going around the object like that until we're back at the starting point, and there we go. And now we can adjust the position of the light bulb, because if you notice, if you're looking at the spacing between these lines and the light bulb, we want it to be roughly equal going all the way around. So you may have to reposition and maybe even resize it a little bit. Just make sure to hold Control and Shift while scaling so that it scales from the center. Otherwise, you're going to get an offset scaling like that, which you don't want. And once that's done, let me actually take this and move it out of the way. I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup, and then I will go to Path and select Combine. And what I will do now is I want to make some of these lines shorter than the other. So to do that, I'm going to grab my Nodes tool, and I'm going to select the top node of this line right here. Not the center line, but the one to the left of it. And then I'll hold Shift, and skipping every other line, I'll just select the top node like that. If you notice, I'm skipping every other line and selecting the top node of the ones between them. And with those nodes selected, I will enable the transformation handles by clicking that icon up there. And then I'll hold Control and Shift and grab one of these arrows and scale that in like that. If you notice, we can now scale that in or out or whatever you want to do. I'm going to make it about that much shorter. That looks pretty good. Let me disable that now. And let me zoom back out. Let me center this back up now with those two objects. And now I can delete these parts of the lines out of here. So let me select this, go to the Nodes tool, and I can just select all of these nodes right here. Or maybe I'll just select these ones down here and press delete. And I'll do the same thing over here. Select those nodes, press delete. And if you want, you could delete these nodes out of here as well. I'm not sure if that's going too far. I'm just going to press Control Z to put them back in there. I think it looks better with them there. And now we can bring this back up to 100%. And the last part now is to create this bottom part of the light bulb right there. So that should be pretty easy. We're just going to use some rectangles. You know what? First, let me select these strokes and convert them to paths. So let me go to Path and select Stroke to Path. And now we can come down here and create those rectangles. So let me grab my rectangle tool. I'll click and drag. I'm going to have to apply a black fill. Let me get rid of the white stroke by holding Shift and clicking the X down there. And let me just adjust this. Grab the rectangle tool again, and I'm just going to make this rounded. Make that a little smaller. And then I'm going to hold Shift and click on the light bulb and make sure I have it centered. And now I can just duplicate that by selecting it and pressing Control D. Hold Control and click and drag this down here. And now we just got to create the bottom part, which is this right here. So to do that, let me make a duplicate of that. Control D, hold Control, bring this down here. And this one, I'm going to hold Control and scale it down about that much. Or you know what, I'm not going to scale it down. Let me press Control Z to undo that. I'm going to convert this to a path. We'll go to Path, Object to Path. Let me grab my Nodes tool, and I'm going to select all of those nodes, and I want to make them corner nodes by clicking this button over here that says Make Selected Nodes Corner. I'm going to click that once. And now I can select just these two top nodes right here, press Delete to get rid of them, and then hold Control and click on each of these handles right here so that we have a half rectangle like that. And now I could take these two nodes, hold Control, bring them in, and do the same thing over here, bring them in like that. And put this up here like this. And we want to make sure there's an equal amount of spacing between all of these three objects right here. So I'm going to hold Shift and click on all of these objects to select them. I'm going to make sure they're centered, and then I will click this button down here that says Distribute Vertically with Even Vertical Gaps. And now I can just add another shape down here at the bottom. So let me grab my rectangle tool, click and drag to draw a rectangle. Let me make that a sharp corner. Go to Path, Object to Path. Now I can grab the Nodes tool, take those two nodes, enable the transformation handles, and hold Control and Shift and scale that in like that. Disable the handles now, and then add the corners LPE. And then we could take those two nodes and round them off like that. And go to Path, Object to Path. And then I'm just going to select both of those and make sure I have them centered. And now we can select everything and go to, or you know what, you may want to make this one I'm just going to make this is going to bother me if I leave it as it is. I'm going to make this one a little wider. So I'm going to select those nodes and bring them out like that. Okay, that's a lot better. Let me zoom out, select all of it, and go to Path, Union. And just like that, we have created our light bulb icon. Next, we will go over how to make this protractor icon. This is a lot simpler than the other one we just created, so let's get started on that. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and click and drag to draw a rectangle about that size, and I will make this rounded. And then I will go to Path, Object to Path, go to the Nodes tool, select all of these nodes and make them corner nodes. And then I could take these two bottom nodes down here and press delete on the keyboard to get rid of them, and then hold control and click on each of these handles to flatten them. And now we have a half rectangle like that. And now I'm just going to grab the rectangle tool and I'll create another smaller rectangle about that size going in there. And I will select both of those and make sure the bottom edges are aligned. And then we can unify it together by going to Path and selecting Union. And then we can click to get the rotation handles, and I'm going to hold Control and just rotate this around. Again, holding Control, I'll go clockwise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps for now. And then I will duplicate this by pressing Control D. And then I will flip this horizontally. You can use the button up here to flip it. I just like pressing H on the keyboard. It's a lot quicker. So I'll press H on the keyboard to flip that, and I'll move this over here. And I'm not paying attention to where these two meet up here. I'm paying more attention to the spacing down here. I want these spaced out a little more. And I'm going to put a circle up here in the middle of these two. So let me grab my circles and ellipses tool. And I'll hold Control and click and drag to draw a circle. And I'll place this about in the middle, right here. And I'll right click that and go to duplicate, and I'll make this one white. And I'll hold Control and scale that down. Control and Shift and scale that down about that far. And if you notice here, I have another circle in there as well. So I'm going to create another circle. Let me right click and go to duplicate, make that one black, and then hold Control and Shift and scale that down about that far. Now what I want to do is I want to get rid of the top parts of these rectangles over here. I want to get rid of the top part that protrudes beyond that circle. So let me grab the rectangle tool, and I'll just click and drag to draw a rectangle going over that space. And go back to my selection tool. I'll press Control D to duplicate it, hold Shift, click on this rectangle and go to Path, Difference, and then I'll repeat that process. I'll click on this rectangle, hold Shift, click on this rectangle and go to Path, Difference, and now that's out of the way. And now I'm going to create the top part, which is this little rectangle coming out of here. So let me grab my rectangle tool again, click and drag to draw a rectangle, and I'm just going to make sure I have this centered. I'm going to hold Shift and click on the circle and make sure it's centered vertically. And then we can grab let me grab the rectangle tool again and make this all the way rounded. And now we can select everything here. Let me hold Shift and click on this small black circle in the center to deselect that. And then I'll hold Shift and click on this white circle in the center to deselect that and go to Path, Union. So now this is all one shape in here. And with that selected, I can hold Shift and click on the white circle and go to Path, Difference. And now we can select both of these and go to Path, Union. And just like that, that's done. So now we just got to create this bottom part down here, just a couple of rectangles, and then we'll be done. So let me grab my rectangle tool, click and drag to draw a rectangle going through here. I'm going to make this a little smaller. Make sure you have it centered. And then I'll draw another rectangle going in the middle here. And make sure you have these centered as well. Make sure they're centered on the horizontal axis, and then you select all of this and make sure all of it is centered. And now I'm going to take just this object, the larger object, I'll press Control D to duplicate it, I'll make this red and bring the opacity down 50% just so I can see it better. And then I'm going to apply that outset or that offset that I was using before, where you can go to Path and select Outset. But I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control-0. So I'm going to press that a few times. 5 times is good. Hold Shift, click on that rectangle, and go to Path, Difference. And then I'll zoom out. And now I can select everything here and go to Path, Union. And as you can see, we have pretty quickly created that protractor icon. And for the final part of this lesson, I will demonstrate how to create this microscope icon. So let's get started on that. I'm going to grab my circle tool, hold Control and click and drag to draw a circle. And I'm going to apply a black stroke by holding Shift and clicking the black swatch. And then I will remove the red fill by clicking the red X down here. And I'm going to make this a little larger. Let me come over here to my fill and stroke menu, and I'll make this, let me try that again. Let me make that 30 instead of 20. Maybe a little larger. I'll try 40. Okay, now I'll go to my nodes tool, and I want to convert this to a path by going to Path and selecting Object to Path. And then I want to select these two nodes right here and add a new node between them by clicking the Add New Node button over here. And then I'll do the same thing down here with these bottom two paths. Select those two and go to click on this button that says Insert a New Node. And then I want to select just this node right here, this newer node on the top right, and then hold Shift and select this node right here on the left and go to, we're going to click on this button up here that says Break Path at Selected Nodes, and then go to Path and select Break Apart. And let me go to my selection tool, press Escape to deselect, and then just take that piece and get rid of it. And now we're going to take this object, let's click on it again to get the rotation handles, and hold Control and take this arrow and move it counterclockwise 1 step like that. And now we're going to create a base down here for the rectangles, or for the microscope. So let me grab my rectangle tool, and I'll click and drag to draw a rectangle. Let me fill this with black. Let me hold Shift, click the X to get rid of that outline, and I want to make this sharp corners. And let me just size this up and position it where it needs to be. You can select both of these and center them vertically. Now I'm going to select this rectangle and go to Path, Object to Path, and I'll grab my Nodes tool, select these two nodes, and grab the transformation handles, turn that on, and then hold Control and Shift and scale these two handles, or these two nodes out like that. Then we can turn off the transformation handles. We can add the Add Corners LPE option, and then take those two nodes and let's round them like that. And now we can convert that to a path by clicking this button over here that says Object to Path. And there we go. So let me zoom out. Now I'm going to create, let me create the base for the microscope over here. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool again and click and drag to draw a rectangle right there. Just a really simple shape. Let me make that rounded. And go to my selection tool and adjust that as needed. Okay, so that part's out of the way. Now we're going to create the top part over here. So let me first turn on snapping, and then I'll grab the circles and ellipses tool, and I'm going to snap to the end of this path right here, and then click and drag, and then hold Control and Shift to scale it out from the center so that we have a center coming from the center of that end node like that. Let me scale that out about that far. Let me turn off snapping now. Let me right click that and go to duplicate, and I'll make this white. I'll hold Control and Shift and scale that down about that far. And now let's select everything here and bring the opacity up to 100. So I'm going to come down here and press 100. And now we get a better view of everything. So let me take this, scale that down a little more. And let me take this line right here and convert that to a stroke. So we'll go to Path, or convert it to a path. So we'll go to Stroke to Path. And now we're just going to create this top part of the microscope right here. So to do that, Just a couple of simple rectangles. Let me grab my rectangle tool, draw a rectangle. Let me make that black so I can see it. And let me just adjust that a little bit. And I'm going to duplicate this by pressing Command D. And then I'll hold Shift and take this top arrow and scale that out. And then holding Shift again, scale this in. And then I will continue to adjust this as needed, making sure you hold Shift. And I will make this less rounded. Let me grab my rectangle tool. I just want it slightly rounded. That looks a lot better. And maybe the same over here, a little less rounded. Okay, now we can select both of these and go to Path Union. And I can click on it to get the rotation handles, hold Control and rotate this clockwise 1, 2, 3. 3 steps clockwise and move this over here. And now you can scale it up and down as needed. I'm going to scale mine up about that much. And I want to position it so that it's kind of looking at the base there. You may even have to rotate it a little bit. It doesn't have to be exactly in 15-degree increments. Okay, that's good. Let me send that to the bottom. And now I'm going to take this larger black circle. I'll press Control D to duplicate it, make it white, hold Control and Shift and scale it up a little bit. And now I want to lower this beneath the other circle. So I'm going to press the page down key a few times until it goes beneath like that. And let me take this, let me lower it down a little more. There we go. And now I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Just make some minor adjustments here. And now I can have this selected. With this selected, hold Shift, click on the white circle, and go to Path Difference. And now we can select everything here and move that away from the other objects. And with all of this selected, hold Shift and click on the white circle to deselect that and unify that all together by going to Path Union. And now you can hold Shift and click on the white circle and then go to Path Difference. And then we're finished. And that is how you can create that microscope icon. And that should do it for today's tutorial. Hopefully you found some of that helpful, and as always, thanks for watching. If you found this lesson useful, then consider checking out my Inkscape Masterclass. It's a collection of over 60 videos where I go over all of the tools and features in Inkscape, and I explain what they are and demonstrate how they work. Kind of like how I did in this video. We even have a private community where you can ask questions and get help from me anytime you want. And best of all, there's no monthly membership fees. You just pay $17 one time and you're in for life. I'll have some information about that down below if you want to check that out. As always, thanks for watching.